Christian Reflections is an anthology of scholarly periodicals, writings, and speeches by C.S. Lewis, some never before published. These works develop and expound on Lewis's remarkable theology known as Mere Christianity. In this presentation, we will be focusing on two essays from the book. The first is called On Ethics, written in 1943. The second is The Seeing Eye, which was written 24 years later in 1967. On Ethics addresses the question, should the world return to Christian ethics or, in the name of progressivism, leave it behind? Lewis defines an ethical system as a body of ethical injunctions, or the content that makes up an ethical system. For example, the ethical system of Christianity would include humility, forgiveness, and martyrdom. Arguing that Christian ethics either helps or hurts humanity presupposes that, 1, Christian ethics is one of many systems of different injunctions, and the entire future of our species depends on our choice between them. And number 2, those seeking to decide between ethical systems are inadvertently claiming to be standing outside of all systems in some sort of ethical vacuum. But Christianity did not bring a new ethical code into the world. In fact, an ethical code has always existed. The message of Christianity, repentance and offering of forgiveness, would be meaningless except on the assumption of moral law already known and already broken. Lewis says it's impossible to create an ethical system from nothing. A man who claims to have created an ethical system is unwittingly implying that he started from a blank slate. In reality, the man is actually using a moral law that already exists and his own moral experiences to create a new ethic. Lewis's point is that when a man is wholly unethical, he does not choose between ethical codes, and those who say they are choosing between ethical codes are already assuming a code.
The reason that Lewis does not think that there is a true ethical vacuum is that it is impossible not to adopt or create a new code from scratch. In essence, they are truly taking pieces from other moralities and revising that ethic, or discarding it altogether. So instead of creating ethics out of nothing, they are taking what is already given to them, such as through Islam, Christianity, or Hinduism, and refining it to make sense within their own moral desires. For example, if one is to say that duty to country is the ultimate ethic, then they are not coming from nothing. Rather, they are coming from an idea that states one must love and support those around him and his nation. Thus, we end up with the Nationalist Party. In a certain sense, it is no more possible to invent a new ethic than to place a new sun in the sky. So-called new ethics are often expanding or contracting a certain element of human traditions, not creating a new one. Many like to conceal the fact that they are using human traditions by pointing to other cultures and exaggerating the differences between them. If there are so many differences, then how could there be one ethic? Let us compare the savage and the civilized man. Savages, as Lewis calls them, who don't adhere to our standards aren't typical. They are the exception. Their practices are specific to them. The savage still has a sexual moral, family morals, tribal morals. They still adhere to a code of ethics. The rest of the world, the civilized man, has more of an understanding of what it should look like. In triumphant monotony, the same indispensable platitudes will meet us in culture after culture. By merely having conversations about ethics, we are adhering to an ethical code whose validity has already been assumed. Consider the concept of justice. It often interferes with caring for the masses, or patriotism can sometimes affect mercy. We have also seen older generations being subjected to medical experiments in order to benefit younger generations. The ultimate ethical code was not created by Christianity, it was supposed by it. The ethical code consists of premises, not conclusions. Ethics state that if you adopt this set of morals, then this will be the outcome. Traditional morality does not claim to have the answers to all moral questions. This should not be an argument used against traditional moralism, because moral codes will naturally create moral problems, just like how the rules of chess create problems in a chess game. A person who can't count doesn't have mathematical problems, just like the sleeping man is free from all problems. Unfortunately, some moral problems will be solved wrongly, because we are, after all, imperfect humans, not beasts or gods. There is no ethical alternative. Those who urge us to adopt new moralities are only offering us the mutilated or expurgated text of a book which we already possess in the original manuscript. Their activity, in the long run, is always directed against our freedom. Like Lewis says in Mere Christianity, the moral law has existed since the beginning of time, and it is from this which we derive our ethics. So, should the world return to Christian ethics, or in the name of progressivism, leave it behind? In conclusion, Lewis's answer to this question is that it is impossible for anyone to abandon the ethical system that Christianity presupposed.
When it comes to C.S. Lewis, we know that most of what he says is way too dense for some of us to wrap our heads around, but we still try to. In his essay, The Seeing Eye, Lewis was writing during the time of the space race. The Russians had just sent someone to space, but no one had yet stepped foot on the moon. Many had the question of, when we finally breach the sky, will God be there? For all, the answer was disappointing. There was nothing but emptiness. There was no God sitting in a chair looking down on us. Because of this, Lewis begins to think through a few conclusions of his own. The first being that the Russians did find God in space, but have no idea how to detect him. The second being that God does exist, but is not an object either located in a particular part of space nor diffused throughout. Looking for God or Jesus in the universe is like looking for Shakespeare inside one of his plays. We do know that this is an incomplete analogy, and Lewis addresses this later. Lewis tells us that Shakespeare is everywhere and nowhere at the same time inside his plays. He is equal to, but unequal to his plays in a continuous fashion. Lewis uses this to frame how God is connected to the universe. He says that God is related to everything more as an author to a play than any one object is related to another.
Lewis explains that if God created the universe, he would be the founder of space-time, which is to the universe as a key is to music. So to look for him as something inside the created order would be a foolish task. That being said, Lewis argues that one cannot reach God by merely moving through space or time. In the same way, one cannot move any further away from God. But how then can one reach or avoid God? When it comes to avoiding God, Lewis explains that it is quite simple. If one avoids silence, solitude, or any thoughts that contest one's predisposed views, they avoid any real interaction with God. In a realistic sense, money, sex, status, or even health are distractions that people fill their lives with to subconsciously avoid God. Reaching God, on the other hand, is a far more difficult question. Lewis explains that he is a far less reliable guide on this matter. Instead of speaking about how one can draw closer to God, Lewis surprisingly says that God was actually the one that found him. He compares this interaction to how a native redskin hunts a deer, as one who stalks his prey, takes aim, and fires. In this encounter with God, Lewis explains what happened when he was making an effort to obey his conscience. Through his efforts, Lewis was trying to figure out what exactly he was trying to obey. The answer was himself and his own inner voice. Lewis asks, but who am I? What does this personal pronoun I even mean? Biblically, I is the name God revealed himself to Moses, and it is a sacred name. This question bothered Lewis. What were the things that make up I? Lewis found that what one called him or herself was only a thin film on the surface of an unsounded and dangerous sea. Essentially, who we are is a facade. Lewis' point is this. we cannot truly see what everything is made up of. The trees, clouds, mountains, they are all facades. None can see the atoms that assemble the universe. Therefore, we do not know even ourselves. We are inscrutable, mysterious, and without direction. In the mind of Lewis, even the theologians and psychologists, the intellectual elite, cannot even pinpoint what we are. They are only able to say that we are like something or some other thing. Even the physicists break us down by means of mathematics that finally results in an equation. Though the mathematical equations are true about reality, they contain no true reality from within. It is clear the more we learn or discover about who we are and what we are, the more the mystery about ourselves and existence deepens. The next point Lewis makes is a specific type of person. This person is one who believes in the unity between all existing things. This person sees behind every illusion which points to one answer, Almighty God. Contact with this mystery is found in the area one calls the conscious self. Matter is inconsequential when viewed in light of the conscious connection. The conscience I is continuous to an unknown depth, unlike the physical. Those who come to believe in this realization may even come to hear the subtle voice that speaks within the conscience. Sometimes it may be a silent voice, other times it is a bold and emphatic one. When one hears this voice, it is precisely at this time that he is in closest contact with this mystery. This mystery for Lewis is God. It is this mystery that ultimately ought to be trusted, obeyed, feared, and desired more than anything else. But again, if you are a different kind of person, you will not come to this conclusion. Everything that has been said about the conscience, the self, and the mystery all stem from the first astronomical question from the beginning. However, the process of hearing or seeing God depends upon the perspective of the person, that is, whether one believes in God or not. Lewis goes further, saying that if one is brought up in a society or a group of people who predominantly hold to a certain view, they will most likely be predisposed to those views and ways of thinking. Now it is obviously clear that space travel really has nothing to do with the question. It all comes down to the point of view. God is discoverable everywhere to some and nowhere to others. If one cannot find God on earth, he will surely not find him in space. But as Lewis says, send a saint up in a spaceship and he will find God in space, just as he has found God on earth. Much depends on the seeing eye.
Lewis brings us very quickly back into his play analogy. He rewrites it, this time showing us a crude model of the incarnation. He says that finding Shakespeare in his own play would be possible if he was a character, but that character was also pelted with tomatoes and thrown out of the show. He then takes a play called Dante's Divine Comedy and focuses on a few specific parts of the play itself. The characters in the play have no idea that Dante is the author, director, and an actor of his own play. It's impossible for them to know since they have no free will, only what the script says. But for us, when Jesus was on the earth, there was a way to know that he was the author, not merely an actor. Lewis tells us that for a time, Peter may have been the only one on earth to truly know who Jesus was. This is something not found out by scientific tests or theories, which is why Lewis is unbothered by the Russians' inability to find God in space. But their space travel led him to having other problems. First, he was selfishly worried that one day the moon would just be another battleground owned by different countries, and that very thing, which inspired countless poems, love songs, and myths, would be tainted forever. The next problem he had was the fact that as humans, we have a perceived need to be the strongest. If we met an alien race, we would treat them the same as we have treated other humans who don't look like us. which means that we might run into aliens stronger than us and face slavery from them. As a race, Lewis says we're not ready for aliens. On the topic of aliens still, Lewis tells us that there would be 3 types of aliens out there. The first is one that is totally and utterly innocent. Only peace would exist on the planet for them. No disease or war or famine. The next type of alien would be one like us, not inherently good, but not inherently bad, just living life in an in-between stage. The third is one that Lewis is fearful of, an alien race that pushes the limits of what we think total depravity means. They are evil to their core. Nothing good can come from them, but they were all in need of the gospel. Yet Lewis leaves us with a sobering quote, telling us to learn first how to treat each other, and that alien evangelism is a bridge we are not sure exists, but if it does, we'll cross it when we get there.